Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in their respective journeys through this thing we call life. On today's episode, our topic is the economic state of Black America. I think this is certainly a topic that the five of us have discussed probably ad nauseum, over the course of time just amongst ourselves, but something that we want to discuss in public today. So I know it's a kind of a complicated topic as well, but who wants to jump us off and get started with their thoughts on this kind of deep topic?
Uh, let's see. My thoughts. Um, Lord knows we got a whole lot of work to do, especially when it comes to the economic status in our community. Um, One thing that we have to acknowledge, I think, is that our dollars are. We all know our dollars are important, and everybody else knows our dollars are important because we are 9 times out of 10, in my opinion, the target of everybody's advertisements. And the sad part about it is, even though our dollars are important, um, our own folk don't want to spend our money with our own folk. We'll go someplace else. We'll go to another community. We'll go to a store that's owned by another nationality versus going to give the money to somebody that looks like us. And we have got to uh, do like everybody else is doing and start focusing our money and our funds in our own community and lifting each other up instead of lifting everybody else up first and worrying about, we've talked about this before, just because somebody that looks like us may charge a little bit more. Well, I'm not going to give them the money because, well, I'll go somewhere else because they're a little bit cheaper, or we're always looking for a hookup. But that's just the initial thought that I have starting this out. And I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say as well. So I yield the floor.
I think it depends on what part of the country you in too. I mean, I know some of our people, like I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Just the opportunity for uh, minority entrepreneurs is just slim and none in the first place. So you got to look at where are you and how can you pull your community together. Like what Ray was saying, in a community like that, it's hard to pull people together because if everybody just scrapping to survive, you know, um, it's hard to pull people together in that realm. But then when you look, where I live in Maryland, you have more people that have entrepreneurial opportunities. And so I do. I know I seek out. I even seek out. I got a black-owned dollar store that I go to. So so anytime that I have the opportunity to support people of color, I will do that. But this whole topic, just the economic status. I mean, like you said, we talked about it before. We talked about the healthcare, how that impacts the economic status of our community. I guess for us, and is where do we start, and then where do we get people to get excited, if you will, about being part of that start of economic empowerment for people of color? Because some people will start and then they get frustrated, then they quit. And so how do we, I guess, ignite people to keep going and actually seeking out? And like Ray was saying, yeah, it may cost a little more, but if we're trying to bring our dollars together, we should do what we can to seek out. We almost need to go back to that green book status. You ever heard about the green book? The green book. We almost need to come up with something like that for entrepreneurs. And now we have so many. We got people that sell, cannabis. We got people that selling oils and black car dealerships. Maybe we need to come up with, we put together a book of black entrepreneurs that are doing things and put that book together almost like the green book again. But I know we're going to talk more about this, so I yield my stance.
I like that point that you made about the green book. I think it's well. I don't want to say documented, but I think the consistent talking point is um, that the economic status of the Black community of Black America is bad, and that we're not doing a lot of things correctly. But I do believe that a lot of times, similar to the status that or the statistic that says that Black fathers are deadbeats, and then when they do the actual statistics, we are more involved in any other group, and things like that. I think, and I read an interesting discourse about Bill Maher was talking about why are we talking about police brutality and rallying for that, but ain't nobody rallying for crime in our communities. And then they said, well, just go into your Facebook events and look and see how many rallies for the community there is. And he said, for most of us, it outnumbers them 3-4 to 1 rallies for stuff in our own community. So I think the misinformation. So I think that Green Book idea, an economic Green Book for the Black community, be awesome. So we would have a more sober look at it, because a lot of times our perspective of the economic status is based on historical facts, but a lot of times there are new sources of income. Like for instance, whenever we say shopping with a Black business, you'll always hear somebody say, yeah, I was in the restaurant and I was waiting. I'm like, that's not the only kind of businesses Black folks have, is restaurants. Like we do so many other things. So I think we definitely room for improvement, definitely work to do, but I think, we need to have something in-house that really lets us know where we are, who are our Black banks, who are our Black billionaires and millionaires, who's Black in tech and STEM and all of these different things, and kind of have a better understanding and, work from there. So that's my opinion on it.
I agree with everything obviously that's been said. And actually there has been, and I have the book. I'll have to get it, because at this point I haven't looked at it in probably 6 months. But there's this brother that I did. He has a PhD as well, and I did this show with him, uh, talking about finance. It's been a couple of years ago now, but he came out with a book that's kind of like that, kind of like the Green Book. I don't know how well it's actually doing, but it's a really good book, and he listed it's kind of just like the Green Book, but in any case, there are some things out there like that. Just needs to be probably publicized a little bit more. But going back to Ray's point about our spending, and both, and all three of you actually have made points about us spending in our own community and things of that nature. And I want to say I may have mentioned this stat last season when we were talking about something, but they say that the dollar circulates, and and by that, what that means, for those who may not know, when you talk about a dollar circulating in a certain community, that talks about how long it actually stays within a particular community before it leaves out of that community. And the longer it stays in, obviously, that's better for that community. So the dollar circulates in the Asian community for like 30 days. In the Jewish community, it's like 20 days. In white communities, it's like 17 days. For the Black community, the dollar circulates for 6 hours, not even days, hours, which is just, that's horrendous. And, I think the stat is something like Black people having, what is it, over $1 trillion, $1.1 trillion maybe in spending power. And the majority of that just goes outside of our own community. And there are, especially in this day and age when we're talking about so much being done online, right? I mean, so much of what we purchase and how we shop these days is online. And while it may be a little bit more challenging at times and in certain areas to find Black owned establishments that are brick and mortar, it is not even remotely hard to find a Black owned business online. They're all over the place. They are prevalent. They're all over the place. And there are a lot of different sites out there, Blavity and We Buy Black, that kind of highlight some of these Black owned businesses and things of that nature. And I know John and I talk about it from time to time, how we shop, at some of these places. Like the majority of the t-shirts that I get are from Black owned businesses, Power and Black Tees and Melanated and all these different ones. But in any case, we just have to do our due diligence and look for them, and stop making excuses and talking about, like John said too, we talk about how, well, I went to this restaurant. We have more than just restaurants out there. And then we also can't be so critical of each other. Like I hear so many Black folks talking about, oh, well, I went to this Black owned place and I ended up waiting for, 30 minutes to, but you know what? If you were in a white establishment and that happened, you wouldn't be talking about it. You're only saying it because it's a Black owned establishment, So aren't we due the same amount of respect and things of that nature as any other, if not even more so, quite frankly? So yeah, those are kind of my initial thoughts on it.
Even Amazon, when you look at Amazon has even started to acknowledge, they have a section of Amazon if you want to just buy Black owned products. You go to Amazon's website, you put Black owned products, they'll give you a list of Black owned products that you can buy through Amazon. But again, we're getting, Amazon is setting people up, but they're getting a portion of it, right?
Of course. So, but it's something, at least, right? At least you're doing something if you spend your money there. You're right. Amazon's getting their share for sure, but at least it's something that we can do.
Yeah, John can speak to that. When John put his book out there on Amazon, they like, you're gonna sell it on our site, but we're gonna get our cut.
Right.
That's why I've been trying to get people to go to my website. I'm like, come on, man. Amazon gonna tax me. Come on.
They're gonna get that cut.
Sure.
But and then I know we talking because all of us have had a chance to live outside of where we grew up. You know what I'm saying? We've all had a chance to, because being in the military, we going to school, things that we've experienced outside of where we grew up. And I'm not saying you can't learn where you've grown up, but a lot of times you miss out on a lot of experiences when you never grow, if you never travel, if you never, I'm not saying you got to join the military, but if you never travel outside of your local state, you miss out on a lot of opportunities and sometimes misinformed. There's a lot of information about owning a business yourself. There's some things you can learn from owning a business that you're not going to get in your community. You got to get outside and network with people to understand what it's like to own a business. And then with that, you also learn, what does it take for me to connect with people outside of my community? How do I connect with these, like you said, Black owned businesses or Hispanic owned business? How do I connect with these organizations or these businesses to, to enhance not only their sales, but just enhance who I am too, and how I grow and how I learn as a person. But this a whole rabbit hole by itself.
No doubt.
Rabbit hole by itself.
And I think that too, when I think about our history, right, Black history, it seems to me like we have regressed with regards to what we're talking about, right, since the civil rights era. And what I mean by that is, you think about from the time that the 13th Amendment came about, right? And we as Black people immediately started thriving. Immediately upon the 13th Amendment. And I mean, we got into politics, right? Hiram Revels became the first senator 5 years after the Civil War, like all of these different things. And since the Civil, we stuck together, right? Everything, we were looking out for each other. Everything was about, helping each other and just sticking together. And if we had businesses, purchasing from those businesses. And then the Civil Rights era happened, right? And then 1968 occurred, which was obviously, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And then we had the very last Civil Rights Act, right? The Fair Housing Act in 1968, a week after Martin Luther King was assassinated, that was signed. And then it was like all of a sudden, the Black community as a whole, it was like we felt like, oh my God, we finally overcome, right? We have technically, that's when we were completely free, right? Right, completely free. That last Civil Rights Act, that did it for us. Now we have all the freedoms of white people in this country. And we started to splinter. Like all of a sudden, we didn't support each other as much. We started putting our money here and doing all of these different things. And since then, it's just gotten progressively worse. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, we shouldn't have had the civil rights movement because of that. But I'm just saying, I feel like things have gotten worse since then. I think about, and I don't want to take up everybody's time, I'm sorry, but I think about, we always talk about the Black Wall Street, right, and the 21 Tulsa race massacre as that being the only thing, but we had so many others, right? We were thriving in many other areas. In fact, Tulsa wasn't even the first Black Wall Street, right? The first one that was considered the Black Wall Street was Jackson Ward in Richmond, right? Which was long before 1921, right? Then we had other areas like Bronzeville in Chicago, Sweet Auburn in Atlanta, which Sweet Auburn is actually still going on, even though it may not be thriving the way that it was. Farris Street in Jackson, Mississippi, West 9th Street in Little Rock, all these different areas that were like Black Wall Streets. And we just thrived and thrived and thrived. Obviously, there were things that happened. White folks did certain things to kind of, whether it be, what happened in Tulsa or some other things, but we just thrived. And since the civil rights era, I feel like we have just kind of, I don't know. I don't even know.
Yeah, to use the word splintered would be, I guess, apropos. But the best way I can put it, man, is we have become our own worst enemy. I never forget my one of the things that my dad used to say back in the day when I was coming up. If you want something done right, he was like, go to the white man. And I'm like, why do you say that? And he said, well, because they're going to do it and they're going to do it right. And it was because he had one bad experience. I'll never forget my mom's beauty salon needed a new roof. And she hired a black contractor, and the guy did not have any experience in flat roofs, but he didn't tell my mom that. He didn't tell my dad that. So he actually came out, botched the job. And then my dad ended up going out and getting another roofing company to come in and repair it correctly. So my dad was just anti, if he wasn't going to, for whatever reason, other than that he had learned, he wasn't going to anybody in the black community. He just figured, if I want the job done right, I'll go to this Jewish guy, or I'll go to this white person over here because they're going to do the job right the first time. And it's that mentality I know is still existing. And we have got to find a way to change that mentality in our own folks. We've talked about stores and things of that nature, but the stores that are in the black community typically aren't black. They're either run by the Koreans, they're run by Hispanics. As my mama would say, they run by the Arabs. Everybody, they weren't allowed to go into the white community to open up their businesses. But they were sure as hell encouraged to go into the black community because our dollars are there, and we will spend our dollars with them. And like I said, when we have someone that looks like us that owns a business, and my mom experienced this firsthand as a cosmetologist. She's one of two that was in Warren. But because if they saw her driving a nice car, I'm not paying for her Cadillac. I'm not paying for her whatever car she was driving at the time. Say we'll go someplace else, or go to somebody that had no experience whatsoever in doing black hair. But so and that still exists today. I mean, nail salons. You don't see any nail salons, black-owned nail salons in our communities. They're always owned by another demographic. And somehow we have got to find a way to change that mentality and do like the Hispanics do. If I go down here to Plant City, I guarantee you the first convenience store I'm going to run into is Hispanic owned. And there are going to be a ton of Hispanics in there spending their dollars in their own community, just to your point, Kevin. And we have got to find a way to turn this train around, because we're literally killing ourselves and we've got to find a way to start supporting each other.
You know what's so funny about that, or I'm sorry, Ray, what you said too is the fact that we do that, but most other communities won't do that. When you think about the Asian community, they're not hiring Black folks. They're not hiring anybody outside of the Asian community
Right.
to work in their stores and do all of that things and do all that, and they support each other. They'll tell you. I've heard many a time where you've heard people in the Asian community who will say, and it's the older folks, right? To be fair, I'm not talking millennials or anything, but who will say that, oh yeah, no, I'm not spending my money outside the Asian community. That's the only place I'm going to spend my money, and those are the only people that I'm going to hire. And there are a lot of different communities who feel that way, and yet here we are.
Right. I mean, I sit back and I laugh because I think about when Stephon Marbury came out with his Starbury shoes. He got ridiculed. But that was a Black-owned shoe company, but we refused to support him. And he made sure that those shoes were affordable for kids, but our kids would run out, or our folks would run out and spend hundreds of dollars on a pair of Air Jordans or another pair of Nikes instead of supporting someone that looks like us. We got to change the mindset.
Yeah.
No, I think apropos was the perfect way to describe it. I think it's important to understand there's several contextual circumstances that it's important to consider. So I think it's important to understand that we are just as subject to propaganda as any other group. And so a lot of times when you have other groups that believe that Black people are this or Black people are that, whether it be a negative or a positive stereotype, we ourselves are just as able to be influenced by said propaganda. And so a lot of times it's but in cases, it's the idea or the perception, what we've heard, what we've learned, especially certain times. And so I think we have to be mindful of that there is a stigma to dealing with Black businesses, and it's funny you talked about the Starberries, and then they also kind of made fun of Shaq with his shoes because he wanted to make them affordable. But I'm seeing a heavy renaissance of, and that's a perfect case of propaganda. Air Jordans aren't popular because Nike's a white-owned company. They're popular because they were smart enough to use a Black player who happened to be one of the most electric players in the history of the sport. Propaganda, and so people didn't consider, Starberry and it's a Black owner. They considered Jordan is the better player and it's a shoe that comes with more colors and styles and blah, blah, blah. And, so I think we have to consider those contexts. We've got to consider the context of, there's intentionality. When we talk about other ethnic and racial groups that own stores and property and things in our communities, they did a report and they talked about the high level of denial for small business loans for Black business owners in those communities. But the bar was much lower for other groups because they intentionally wanted to prevent Black business owners in those communities so other groups could come in and use the community instead of build it up. And that makes us very vulnerable to gentrification and other issues like that. And that's not to say, because I'm a big personal responsibility, that's not to say that we don't have responsibilities, but it's difficult for us to overcome the hurdles that we face when we're not honest about what those hurdles are. If we say we're the problem, then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I need to run faster. And I'm not talking about the fact that there's a hurdle that I need to jump over, and I keep running into the hurdle because I'm not jumping, because I'm not armed with the right information and perspective. So those are things to consider. And I also believe we need to be patient with us because, they've had a many year head start. We know what all of these different societal factors have done to our communities, whether it was, just side effects, or it was directly attacking and destroying the work, that we're putting in. So LJ agrees with me. And so we have to take that into context. And man, I might sit down for the rest of the show, but I need to say this. One of the things that I think it's important when we're talking about economic status, the Black community as a whole, if you're going to love Black people, you got to love Black people. And I don't mean love a certain type of Black people. I don't mean favor the successful ones or the ones that meet the demographics that please you. If you are going to love Black people, and the one thing we've got to understand about oppressed people is that oppression does not make us more virtuous or better people. You've got Black people that are foul, that are evil, that are do all kind of slick stuff. But if you're gonna love Black people, you got to love Black people and understand that all of that comes with it. So when we talk about the economic status, it's gonna be some fools. And we gotta put that in the spreadsheet that, it's gonna be some fools, it's gonna be some people to take advantage. I remember when I first got out to Illinois, man, the school board in East St. Louis, they were going to jail because they were stealing money from a Black community, our people, and if we're gonna look for change, we got to say that come with it. People that we don't like, and there's some other stuff that I could use, but I'm gonna stop right there.
Man, look, I'm like Chris Rock. I love Black people, but I sure can't stand the N-word. Don't want to take any time. I know Rod hadn't had an opportunity to jump in. I didn't know if you're good to go and if you need it.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah. So not knowing exactly what the question was, but I can read it. And just listening to the pieces I have heard. So one, I'll just make a point that there's plenty of money and resources circulating within the Black community, right? We know that. We know how much buying power that's been published that African Americans have in this country. So I think it really boils down to, what do we value, right? So case in point, and I'll just, pick on myself. I look in my closet and it is overflowing with clothes, for instance, and shoes. I don't ever have to go shopping again, not another day in my life. And I'll be able to go to any event that I want to go to, and I think some of that was born out of the fact that, growing up poor, without means and without stuff that you wish you had and had access to, you start to covet those things, and you cover them to the point where you start to accumulate a bunch of stuff until you get to a certain age when you realize that it just doesn't have the same value that I thought it would, or even that it should have in my life, right? So then what should I be pursuing as far as goals are concerned from an economic standpoint, and what should I value? And so I see it a lot clearer now, but I think of all the time, all the years, all the money, resources, that I wasted. And so trying to get that message through to younger folks in our community to really start to seek that out early on. Aside from the fact that, we should be having those conversations in our homes around the dinner table. But I don't know that those are taking place, right? And so then it goes back to the breakdown of the Black family, and and how you have single parents struggling just to make ends meet and not really taking the time or having the time to sit down and invest in their kids the way that they should, or even if they even knew how to, right? Because a lot of them, you can't teach what you don't know. So, so I think then it starts to snowball, and it snowballs into what we see in a lot of our communities around the country. So I think the question is, not necessarily the economic status, because we have the ability to generate a dollar, and we get means flowing through our hands. It's all about the decision making. Once it gets in your hand, what do you do? It's all about the discipline that you exercise or don't exercise. I want to drive the Porsche Panamera and drive it up to my apartment that I don't want to leave it at overnight necessarily. I mean, it's those types of things,
Right.
So it comes really down to our decision making and what we value, and I think that will help to at least guide us a little better, and then start making some really impactful decisions from an economic perspective that will support us, our communities, put us on the path to creating generational wealth, as opposed to, I got mine, you have to figure out how to get yours mentality. When really, we should be, trying to prepare generations coming behind us, to get them the education and the knowledge and the head start that they need to be successful from an economic standpoint within their communities and in this country. And not because it can get you more material things, but it gets you freedom, it gets you access, and in a lot of places, a seat at the table where you normally wouldn't have one. So, so I think it, of course, it's not just about money, but I think that all those things kind of tie in together, and we have to figure out how to start being impactful within the community from an education standpoint. That's really what it boils down for me.
Rod, while B's trying to figure that out, I think you made a lot of great points, and there's so many ways, right? I mean, just this topic alone, there's so many different things different directions we can go in it, right? Talking about our history, talking about what we need to be doing these days, and then that alone covers a lot of things. But you said something when you talked about kind of what we value, and I agree 100% with that. And I think when you talk about us having those conversations with our kids early on about what you value and what you do with your money and that sort of thing, what your values in general, but since we're talking about economics, it's not even just having the conversations, but probably even more so how you are modeling that, because you can tell your kids all day long what they should be, or that they should be valuing something and not just materialistic things. But if that's what you're doing, then your actions speak louder than words. And I think about me specifically, right? Like I think about when Kayla was young and really at her youngest impressionable age. And for me at that time, yes, I started investing and doing things with my money to set myself up and set the family up for success when I was like 25, right? That's when I kind of really learned about investing and starting to do the right things. But I had my values were different, right? What I valued was different. And shit, it's no secret. Everybody on this panel knows how I used to shop. I got it in. And on top of that, I was the person who was switching out cars every 3 years or so, right? And I'm not knocking anybody who does that, right? If that's what you choose to do, you do what you want. But for me, right, I had to come, and that's what I modeled for Kayla, right? That's what Kayla saw. She saw me shopping constantly. She saw me changing out my cars every few years. And even though I was investing and doing a lot of great things with my money, we didn't really have those conversations, right? And shame on me for thinking, she's probably too young to understand that and all that. And so I should have been not only modeling things differently, but you know, right, when you know better, you do better too, right?
Mhm.
And it wasn't until probably about the last 12, 13, 14 years or so that my values changed, right? And my shopping diminished. And like you, Rod, yeah, I probably never ever need to go shopping again and I'd be fine. Um, but yeah, and I'll let you go, B. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to touch on that because I agree with what you said 100%. You know, we really have to not only change our values, but also show that and model that for the younger generation. So,
Oh yeah, what Rob was saying, I think the big thing for us is learn to be disciplined, because some of us have come out of backgrounds where we weren't, as kids, we didn't have things,
yes.
and when we got access to money, when we got access to credit cards, we was like, oh, let me go get this, let me go get that. But the one thing we all learned as homeowners is what they tell you when you're trying to qualify for a mortgage: don't buy nothing, don't open up no new credit. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
And that's part of being disciplined. And I think for some of our businesses in our community, it's like, do you open that business? And I think Rod mentioned it about the next generation. And when you think about how some of our counterparts, when they opened up businesses, they thought about their kids.
Yep.
You know, they was like, we're setting up our kids to run this business. And I got a friend of mine right now. He's very successful running a staffing agency. But talking to him the other day, you know, he's not even 55. He's like, I'm already looking at having my kids take over this business. And he gets multi-million-dollar contracts. And he's already thinking about how I'm going to take this over for my kids. And so again, we talked about how people start saving. A lot of times in our community, people feel like, well, I don't make enough money to save. So if I only make it $30,000 a year, that's not enough money to save. But I think if we change our mindset in the education of, let's start preparing for the next generation. Well, I don't have any kids. Well, start saving for your rainy days. You know, I think just that education piece and just learning to be disciplined, that would help out a lot. And again, that, when you go down that rabbit hole, there's a whole lot of things we can talk about. We can talk about how the system, doesn't allow us to learn how to do those things, and you're finally, there's educational things that you're not privy to, so it's a whole bunch of things. But yeah, I think the number one thing is we just got to learn to be disciplined with our funds. We got to be disciplined where we're going to spend our money. We got to be disciplined in saving our money. And I think once we learn how to do that, we can go a long way. Just like, like y'all said, we stop shopping now. We stop shopping, why? Because and not necessarily because we got what we want, because I'm sure, we could empty out our closets and go start shopping all over again, right?
Yeah,
but we've learned to be disciplined with what we have. And to me, I think that's the biggest start. Just learn to be disciplined.
To look at it from another angle too, I think about the fact that I was looking at a stat earlier today that showed the median household income across communities, and it was from 2 years ago, but I'm sure it hasn't changed much, right? But in the Asian community, the median household income was $101,000, right? And obviously, I'm talking annual income. For white households, 78,000. For Hispanics, 58,000. For Blacks, 48,000. Right? And so obviously, we there's a disparity there, right? And we know we have a huge racial wealth gap in this country, and that's a whole other discussion, really, regarding economic status. Not one that I'm going to focus on right now. The one thing I wanted to say about that stat is in line with what Rod, Byron, and what I was just saying as well, because yes, the median income is $48,000 a year, right, for Black people, and that's not a lot of money. But the fact is, you can still be smart about what you're doing. Goes back to what you value, right? That $48,000 can take you a long way if you're doing the right things, right? With regards to investing in not going out, like Rod said, and buying some car that you really can't afford and then parking it in some apartment complex that you're living in that isn't even safe. So it's about what you do with the money that you do make. We have to address the gap. I get that. But for the time being, you can at least do the right things with the money that you are making, right? That 48,000 can be stretched. It really can go a long way if you're doing the right things with your money. So I wanted to bring that up too.
Yeah. My father used to say that. He was like, look, when you got that hoopty, you vacuum it out, you make sure you change the oil, you clean it out and you wash it, you do your best until better comes along, So sometimes we don't want to do that. You went on to drive that hoopty, we want to park it in the back. Can't nobody see the hoopty, but yeah, sometimes you got to drive that hoopty to better come along, baby.
No doubt. And another thing I think we need to do, again, we keep talking about education. We've got to get excited about, when somebody that looks like us opens up a business, we have got to get excited about it, because again, these folks are doing something to help themselves, but also to try and help their community by opening this business in a Black community. We have got to get excited about spending our money with them and get out of this doggone crab in the barrel mentality. Well, I don't have it, so therefore I'm not going to give it to them. I don't want them to get any further ahead than I am. And that's to our own detriment, to our own community, man. And we really have got to change that mindset.
I think that, one of the things that we can do from a macro level, in the Black community is involves group economics, right? Having a collective group, kind of pooling money together for some common interest, some common benefit. I think about these 5 brothers who from Philadelphia who saved $50 a week a piece for 2 years to purchase their first investment property, right? So things like that. It's called Susu savings. It's a French term, but it's effectively group economics, and I think that's one of the things that and I do see that happening. I do see that there are Black folks younger, when we start talking about millennials, I see them doing things like that. But I think some of the older generations, Gen X, baby boomers, we can kind of learn from that too, and start doing those same sorts of things to build wealth.
The Christmas clubs. It was, I remember back in the day, they used to have the Christmas clubs.
Yeah.
Save your money. Then, you couldn't touch it till like the week before Thanksgiving or something like that. But like you said, Kevin, we got to go back to, doing that. I do that now for vacation. I put away X number of dollars every week. That way, when I go on vacation, I ain't got to worry about my lights being on when I come back home.
Dr. Byron. With all due respect, sir. See, it's almost like you're mocking people with less means now. Right?
I stick with what works, baby. You stick with what works. I know my light's gonna be on when I come back home.
Wow.
Oh,
okay.
Man. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a great point. And it just makes you wonder, why more people can't do that. Pool resources, to buy up those houses,
Right,
and fix them up and provide an opportunity for some family to have a decent place to live within the community. Because quite honestly, everybody benefits from that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you that pooled your money, get a return because people are going to move in there and pay rent. And maybe you start with some lease to purchase deals, where people can own their own piece of what they consider the American dream or what they value as far as home ownership. You're still getting paid, you're still making a profit, only now you're helping pull someone else up so that they can get a taste of owning something. You know, why don't more of those programs exist within our community?
Right. I think it's
Because I
also
mean,
incumbent
you
upon.
know,
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good. I thought you were
No, I was
done.
gonna
Go
say,
ahead.
you know, because you know yourself that, you know, when you get a little older and gain a little more knowledge and experience, and your values start to change, you realize that, you know, like Dr. Byron just said, you know, how much do I really need, you know, to keep the lights on and to live in a neighborhood where I feel safe and comfortable. You know, and do I need a new truck every other year? I mean, yeah, I guess if you can afford it and that's what you want to do, you certainly can do that, but it's not a need, you know,
Right.
and but every day you can go in any community throughout this country and you see the real need. And so, and I'm not saying that, you know, that we can save the world or save every person living below the poverty line in this country. But maybe, like you said, model certain behaviors, teach certain lessons, you know, do whatever you can to educate, to provide a different perspective from the ones maybe that they weren't taught for whatever reason, to give them a fighting chance, you know. And if you see one life change because of what you poured into them, then it would have been worth it, right? So, so I would just say for me, I know that's what brings true joy and satisfaction these days, to be able to give back. Because I would tell you, I've been blessed beyond what I probably ever deserved, but I'm thankful for that. And so now it's about finding a way to make that impact, you know. And I do know that it starts with education.
Yeah, no, I think you are 100% right, and I think that's one of the reasons why we do what we do regarding this podcast, as well as the things that we do outside of this as well, is because I think for the most part, the majority of us didn't have what we're trying to provide, right? We didn't have, even if we had black men in our lives, or not even necessarily just men, but black people in our lives, who were mentors and kind of there for us. They weren't in a position to be able to share this kind of knowledge, right? They didn't know. They were struggling, right, from paycheck to paycheck, and they just didn't have the knowledge or the means. And so I think when you get that knowledge, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we are passing that along, so that maybe someone who's 12, 13, 14, even 20, 25 years old, right, who may not have someone in their lives, to be able to share these sorts of things with them, to pass that on. And I also think when we talk about owning businesses and things like that, it's also incumbent upon us to ensure that we are employing people within our community, right? Hiring
Mhm.
Black people. That's one of those things that will help close the wealth gap, right? And so I think that's something else that we have to be cognizant of and make sure that we are doing, that we are employing when we have our businesses, we're employing people within our community that also look like us. Rod said it, and y'all know I'm big on education, but I do agree that everything starts with education, and I'm not talking necessarily formal education, but just educating yourself, right, on a lot of these different things, these things that we've talked about. It's easy to just look up some of the stuff. What can I do? How can I? What are the steps to starting a business? So whatever the case is, a lot of the stuff you can easily find on the internet these days. So just educate yourself and finding out about this stuff, instead of just kind of resting on your laurels. So,
Yeah, I mean, and people walk around with all the knowledge literally at their fingertips.
Yeah, yeah.
And they stay on their phone. And that's why anytime, I know even my own kids, like, okay, you forgot something? How do you forget anything when you got a phone that's constantly in your hand and you can put alerts in? I mean, same thing with access to information. It's all there. And so for me, it comes back to, yes, the focus on education, but the importance that discipline plays in all of that. Right. Setting goals, pursuing your dreams, it all points back to, are you willing to be disciplined? Where you can discipline yourself, not that someone else has to, like the prison system or a judge or an attorney, a prosecutor. Can you discipline yourself to make good choices? Right. So anyway, I know that's off topic, but I think that at the end of the day,
that's right on topic.
The discipline aspect is what I think will give us a fighting chance, no matter what it is that we set as goals in our lives. I look at most of the blunders in my life can be pointed directly to a lack of discipline. And it's not until, we make the decision to change that and to do better and be better, so I think the question is, how do you scale that within a community of people that has been subjected to a lot of hopelessness?
Yeah.
And violence as their answer to problems. So I would just say I am here for it, to support it in any way that I can. But I definitely think that's one of the keys.
Something that John mentioned earlier when he talked about, I don't remember exactly how he put it, but essentially he was talking about us being susceptible to the propaganda, right? And the things that are portrayed about us, and we fall for the banana in the tailpipe, right? We kind of go for that. We listen to those things and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But, going back to the education piece of that, we have to make sure that we're educating ourselves. Don't just believe everything that's being said about the Black community. And our spending. Yes, a lot of what's said about our spending habits is true, but it's not the whole picture, right? Know our history, learn your history, go back and look up these things. Some of these places that I mentioned earlier, right? Bronzeville in Chicago, and Farris Street in Jackson, Sweet Auburn in Atlanta. Looking up those sorts of things and finding out what your/our true history is, right? Looking up someone like Alonzo Herndon, who was born enslaved, right? And immediately upon the 13th Amendment, he went out and started, kind of selling peanuts and trying to make a little bit of money. And I mean, he had obviously no education, but he did that. Left the plantation with $11, learned how to become a barber, right? Ended up opening up a barbershop. Then he opened up another barbershop and another barbershop, all in Atlanta. And then from all of the money he made from that, he ended up starting the Atlanta Life Insurance Company, which is still to this day going strong. We're talking about somebody from the 1860s, right? Who came from nothing and just had a simple dream and had these values and turned it into something that's still going strong right now to this day. So learn your history, know about these things. I think it is so important for the future. No one has anything else. With that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us. And as we wrap up this week's episode, I want to leave you with a quote by Harold Latsky, who was a political theorist, who said, "A state divided into a small number of rich and a large number of poor will always develop a government manipulated by the rich to protect the amenities represented by their property." Until next time, peace.